For the first time in the Fran Brown era, Syracuse is set to face an SEC opponent. Here's what recent history suggests about an ACC team upsetting an SEC opponent.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and of course, we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, the recent ACC versus SEC upsets and what those ACC teams had in common. Plus, how Tennessee has fared versus the ACC over the years. Spoiler alert, they usually handle their business against the ACC, but we'll talk about it later on in the show. First, we're going to go over Syracuse's history versus the SEC and some of the common themes and how Syracuse, surprisingly, has kept it pretty close against the SEC over the years. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. Now, before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. As I said at the top of the podcast, for the first time in the Fran Brown era, Syracuse football is facing an SEC opponent. Of course, they are taking on the Tennessee Volunteers down in Atlanta, Georgia for the Week 1 battle on August 30th. I cannot wait for that one because we're about 2 weeks away from the start of Syracuse football season. Obviously, it's a pretty big deal going up against the SEC. The SEC is widely considered the best conference in all of college football. So naturally, beating an SEC team should give your team out of conference a decent amount of respect. Sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. But the point being is that the SEC, widely considered the best conference in college football, and for a program like Syracuse, pulling off an upset against Tennessee would be a massive deal for this program. But it's been a while since Syracuse has actually faced the SEC. But surprisingly, in the matchups we're going to go over the past 15 years, only 3 of them, Syracuse has actually handled itself quite well. And there are 2 reasons why Syracuse has done quite well against the SEC over the years. The last time Syracuse played an SEC opponent, you got to go back to 2017. That was Dino Babers' second year as head coach at Syracuse. The Orange went into Death Valley, LSU. They lost that game 35-26. But fun fact about that game, Syracuse was down multiple times by 18 points in the third quarter. They managed to pull within 2 late in the fourth quarter. So Syracuse had a legitimate chance to win at LSU back in 2017. Another fun fact about that game and that season in general for Syracuse and LSU was that Syracuse in 2017 was not a very good team. They finished that year 4-8, which means they missed a bowl. LSU, on the other hand, they had a strong season. I guess from a national perspective, maybe not by LSU fans, but they went 9-3 in the regular season and 6-2 in SEC play. What should the takeaway there be? I guess it's the fact that even a not so great Syracuse team could actually keep it pretty close against one of the better SEC teams. Fair enough. Syracuse and LSU also played each other in 2015. That was a home game for Syracuse. It was not as close. Leonard Fournette went off, but still the final margin of defeat for Syracuse was just 10 points. The last time Syracuse beat an SEC opponent, you got to go all the way back to 2012, Doug Marrone's final season as head coach of Syracuse football. Syracuse won at Missouri 31-27. Ryan Nassib threw the game-winning touchdown with 20 seconds left to Alec Lemon. So what are the common themes there for Syracuse, and how have the Orange kept it quite close the last 3 times they have played the SEC? Number one, for the most part, strong quarterback play. They had strong quarterback play in the win against Missouri, which we'll get to in just a second. And they had strong quarterback play in the loss at LSU by 9 points. SEC teams are naturally going to have more talent than ACC teams. And the reason is because if you look at the recruiting classes, typically in a year in and year out basis, the average SEC team will have a better recruiting class than an ACC team. But one way to neutralize that is to get strong quarterback play. And Syracuse, in 2 of the 3 matchups, got strong quarterback play, which kept them in the game. And in the case of Missouri, actually allowed Syracuse to beat an SEC opponent. Again, SEC teams typically going to have more talent, but if your quarterback is on his game, you definitely have a chance to pull off an upset. It's why quarterback is the most valuable position in football and arguably the most valuable position in all of sports. The 2017 loss to LSU, regarding strong quarterback play, Eric Dungy went 32 of 52 for 265 pass yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and he also added 1 touchdown on the ground. In the 2012 win against Missouri, Ryan Nassib had a huge day. He went 26 of 40, 385 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. It also helps that Alec Lemon had 244 receiving yards that day. But the point being is that in 2 of those 3 games, Syracuse was able to keep it close or even win because they got strong quarterback play. Number 2, little turnovers. It's already hard enough to win a football game when you turn the ball over a lot. That's just a blank statement right there. It's already hard enough. Even if you're a team that is expected to win. We're going to get to a matchup later on in the show of a team that had 5 turnovers, and that was the main reason they lost to an ACC team. You do not want to turn the ball over as the favorite. If you are an underdog, you have basically no chance of pulling off an upset if you're turning the ball over. Think about it this way. You need to maximize the amount of possessions that you have. You're already considered the lesser team. So you need the ball more to score more points. If you're turning the ball over consistently, you're kind of screwed. Well, in all those games, Syracuse only had 1 turnover. 1 turnover in each, I should say. 2017, 1 turnover. 2015 against LSU again, 1 turnover. 2012 against Missouri, just 1 turnover. Now, the reason why the game in 2015 against LSU wasn't as close is because they didn't necessarily get the strongest quarterback play in that game. But in order for Syracuse, what recent history says, to pull off an upset or at least have a chance at pulling off an upset against an SEC opponent like Tennessee, you need strong quarterback play, and you're also going to need to limit turnovers as much as possible. What are your early keys for Syracuse pulling off an upset against Tennessee? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, coming up, Tennessee's recent history against the ACC and what we can learn as Syracuse fans. Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions, so whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. And one bet that I am eyeing over on FanDuel right now, NFC Championship winner this season. The Eagles, obviously, they are the favorite. They are the defending champions, period. Detroit Lions in second. 49ers in third, LA Rams in fourth, and then you got a tie for fifth between the Green Bay Packers at plus 1,000 and the Washington Commanders at plus 1,000. Last time I checked, Washington has a second-year quarterback in Jaden Daniels who had an excellent rookie year, and they were just in the NFC Championship game. I don't think FanDuel is giving them enough respect at plus 1,000 odds to win the NFC. So in my opinion, that is some value right there to win the conference. So that's, I guess, my bet, my futures bet that I have on the NFL this season, the Washington Commanders to win the NFC. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, player game. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we still got plenty more to talk about here on today's show. Syracuse history versus the SEC, Tennessee versus the ACC in just a moment, and the recent history of ACC versus SEC upsets. But before we get to everything, just want to shout out to all those who've made it this far in the podcast already. Truly means a ton. Thank you all so much. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans, especially, of course, we are nearing the start of football season, and there's going to be plenty of content coming your way here on Locked On Syracuse. Now, back to the episode here. Tennessee versus the ACC. We'll go since 2021 because that's when Josh Heupel became the head coach of Tennessee. Simply put, Tennessee versus the ACC, since Josh Heupel has taken over, they have handled their business. They have been a bowl team every season. They have won 9+ games the past 3 years, and they have a 4-1 record versus the ACC, and it has progressively gotten worse for the ACC. In 2024, Tennessee played a ranked ACC opponent early in the season. It was NC State. Remember that game? Yeah, Tennessee won that one 51-10. It was not close. It was not a fair fight. The game was over by halftime. Tennessee outgained NC State by over 300 total yards. So we talk about strong quarterback play and limiting turnovers to try to pull off an upset here. NC State didn't quite do that, did they? I'm sorry to Grayson Boone and Kenton Gibbs, but they know it. It was a really bad game. 2023, Tennessee played Virginia early in the season, and Tennessee won that game only 49-13. Only 36 points. Okay. So 5 points worse than the previous season, I guess. And they only nearly outgained Virginia by 300 yards. Obviously, I'm being very sarcastic. Tennessee blew out Virginia in that one. It was not a fair fight. The game was over by halftime. 2022, they played Clemson in the Orange Bowl. I'm not going to take too much stock in what happens in a bowl game because it's a new era of bowl games where a lot of players just simply sit out. A lot of coaches will play different players than they usually do to try to get a glimpse into the following season. Of course, now players are starting to enter the transfer portal before bowl games even happen. It actually happened with Syracuse last year against Washington State, where Washington State was basically fielding their second team on the field instead of their first team for that game. But regardless, Tennessee did quite well. Whatever the circumstances were, Tennessee beat Clemson 31-14. Again, it's hard to try to draw any conclusions from that, but Tennessee handled its business regardless of who was on the field, regardless of who was coaching. Tennessee did an amazing job in that one. 2022 is where it gets interesting. They went on the road at number 17 Pitt. Tennessee won that game, but they only won in overtime, 34-27. Pitt nearly pulled it out. Izzy Abanikanda, remember the running back? He got drafted by the New York Jets. He ran for over 150 yards. Pitt was a good team that season. They went 8-4 in the regular season. In 2021, this is where Tennessee actually lost to the ACC against the Pitt Panthers. Tennessee lost 41-34 at home. Kenny Pickett led that Pitt team to an ACC title when the season was over. So going through the recent past of Tennessee versus the ACC under head coach Josh Heupel, the main conclusion is that Tennessee has dominated the ACC. There were really only two cases in which they were threatened by an ACC team or they actually outright lost to an ACC team. And that ACC team just happens to be Pitt. Pitt in back-to-back years, 2021 and in 2022. And Tennessee in 2021, that was their worst season under Josh Heupel, which it was Josh Heupel's first year. It makes total sense. And that Tennessee team was still a bowl team. So if Syracuse were to beat Tennessee in week 1, judging by the past of Tennessee and how they've handled the ACC and their strong records year in and year out, I think we would learn more about how good Syracuse is and less so about how bad Tennessee is. I could be totally wrong, but that's my read based on what has happened in the past with head coach Josh Heupel over at Tennessee. What are your takeaways for Tennessee's history versus the ACC over the years? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Coming up, we'll go even broader. The ACC versus the SEC and some of the upsets that have happened recently. Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. As summer winds down, there's something nice about getting back into a routine that you love. And Wayfair makes it easy to set yourself up for the season ahead. From bedding and linens to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair is your one-stop shop to refresh your home. The delivery is fast and free, even for something that is big. This is the perfect time to get your home ready, whether that's organizing, upgrading the workspace, or making weeknight dinners easier. Get organized, refreshed, and back to routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Since 2020, which is this decade, the ACC and the SEC have matched up against each other a grand total of 51 times. The SEC has won about 2/3 of those contests. They are 34-17 versus the ACC. But close calls happen and upsets, of course, do happen. Let's get right into them and some of the common themes we can learn and try to apply them to Syracuse football. 2024, this was the big one that we're about to talk about, and I am sorry to my manager here at the Locked On Podcast Network, Zach Blackerby, the host of Locked On Auburn Tigers. I am referring to the game in which Cal went on the road at Auburn, and they won that one outright 21-14. This is the biggest SEC-ACC upset in quite a while. Some of the other upsets that we're going to go over in just a moment, usually it was only by a few points. This one, Auburn was expected to beat Cal by multiple scores, but they didn't. Now, if you recall, earlier in this podcast, I talked about how, hey, Syracuse against the SEC, they did a very nice job at limiting turnovers. Only one turnover in each of the 3 games. And that's a great way to pull off an upset. Hanging on to the football, not turning it over. Well, in the case of Auburn, there's a reason why they didn't cover the spread or even win the game outright. They turned it over 5 times. They only lost by 7, but they turned it over 5 times, which makes you think if Auburn had simply taken care of the football, they would have rolled over Cal. They would have destroyed them. But they didn't because they turned the ball over 5 times. And Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback for Cal, also had a very nice day. So you combine those 2 factors, strong quarterback play, Cal limiting mistakes, Auburn making a ton of mistakes. That's how you get an upset in Auburn's house against an ACC team. Not even a good ACC team. Cal did make a bowl. It's not like they were the cream of the crop of the ACC last year. They made it, but they weren't very good. Syracuse did quite well at Cal last season. But they went on the road and they beat Auburn because Auburn turned the ball over 5 times. And Cal got good quarterback play. 2024, this was not an upset because it didn't happen. There was the underdog team simply did not win, but it's a game worth bringing up. Georgia beating Georgia Tech 44-42 in 8 overtimes. And the game was at the Georgia Bulldogs, not at the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Georgia Tech did not win that game. And of course, there are no moral victories in sports at the end of the day. But Georgia Tech gained a lot of respect by nearly pulling off that upset. They really should have beaten Georgia. But a late fumble, unfortunately, allowed Georgia to tie that game in the fourth quarter. Then just a back and forth overtime that was bananas. It went Georgia's way. Imagine if Georgia Tech had won that game. Georgia might not even have made the playoff. That's how crazy of a game that truly was. Haynes King, he was phenomenal in that one. And Georgia Tech only had 1 turnover. Unfortunately, it was a very big turnover, but it goes back to the point of if you're going to upset a team in the SEC, you have to limit mistakes. It's as simple as that. Again, Georgia Tech did not win, but they gained a ton of respect. They were a double-digit underdog, and they nearly pulled off the upset. It would have been crazy. 2023, a minor one, but still an upset here. Miami beating Texas A&M. Miami was at home, but they were underdogs by a few points. Miami won that game 48-33, so they beat Texas A&M pretty good in that one as an underdog. Tyler Van Dyke, the quarterback for Miami, surprise, surprise, had a very strong day. 21-30 for 374 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interception. Miami turned the ball over once all game. 2023, Florida State beating LSU. That was the season opener. This was a game that was expected to be close, but LSU was favored by a few points to start that game. FSU quarterback Jordan Travis, predictably, had an awesome night. He went 23 of 31 for 342, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. How many turnovers do you think Florida State had? Just 1 turnover. So, what's the theme? How do ACC teams beat the SEC, especially when they are underdogs? Because Syracuse is a double-digit underdog to Tennessee. Is it even possible? Is there precedent? The answer is yes, it is possible. There is precedent. I'm not going to sit here and say it is easy, but the 2 common trends that I at least noticed in my research, and maybe you can also find some commonalities in those upsets, is that the upsetting team got strong quarterback play and they limited their turnovers. So those are the big keys for Syracuse to pull off an upset against Tennessee. Comment your keys for Syracuse beating Tennessee in the comment section below. And also, later on in the month, in I guess the week leading up to Syracuse and Tennessee, we will be more specific as far as real keys for Syracuse specifically to beat Tennessee as far as personnel and matchup-wise. This was more so the precursor to that podcast, a broad look at ACC versus SEC teams. Now, as far as what's coming up in the near future here on Locked On Syracuse, tomorrow, of course, we got Poll Friday. If you could fix one thing about Syracuse football next season from last year to this year, what would it be? We're going to break it all down tomorrow on Locked On Syracuse. The choices were offensive line play, tackling, and special teams play. So that's what's coming up in the near future here on Locked On Syracuse. Thank you for making us your first listen today. For your second listen, you have a few options. You can check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith. He's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. You can also check out Locked On ACC with hosts Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs. They give you an overall broad landscape of the ACC in general, whether it's football, basketball, realignment news. Stay up to date on all things ACC with Locked On ACC. Of course, you can find that podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, Locked On College Football with host Spencer McLaughlin, a broad look at all things college football. So those are some of your choices that you can watch or listen to here on the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, aside from Locked On Syracuse. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I will see you all again soon.